All right, guys, I got a special edition of the Might Force podcast. I'm here with David Acosta, one of our senior instructors that teaches tactics, a whole bunch of things across the United States in the realm of preparedness. And I wonder if those gunshots in the background are distracting the podcast, because there's a lot of them, and it's because SIG Freedom Days is right down the road. One of the reasons I wanted to do podcasts with Dave specifically is I want you guys to get to know who your instructors are, especially the guys that we're investing a lot of time and resources in to make sure that you guys are getting the best training experience possible. Dave, thanks for being on the podcast.
Appreciate you having me, sir.
Yeah, you have a pretty profound background, and you're like many of our instructors, Matt, Casey, Shay, all the guys and gals that work for us, super humble. And I want to take the opportunity on this podcast to kind of talk about yourself for a little bit and give people context to your background. What is your background? If you were just summing up who you were, who's Dave Acosta?
Just a God-fearing, family-loving American. 17 years in domestic law enforcement. I'm from back up northeast, specifically Connecticut. Always wanted to be a cop. Like, my mom says it was like at the age of 4 or 5 that I would scream and cry and yell if she said I was going to be something else.
Yeah.
You know, she'd drive by and see like firefighters or something of that nature and be like, "Hey, you're going to be a firefighter." And I'd blow a tantrum and be like, "No, I'm going to be a policeman." So something I always wanted to do. Pursued that relentlessly as a kid. Just that was my end state, so to say.
Was it part of your family experience, or?
No, it was just, I think, I used to love, I really don't know what in specific, and it's tough. It's like, my son asked me this week, we have father-son time, and he asked, like, "Daddy, why did you want to be a cop?" And it was like, there's like bad people out there, and I want to be one of the ones that stands the line to protect them. I always wanted to protect good people. My parents reading Bible stories to me, David and Goliath and things of that nature, kind of just, I gravitated toward that. I think it's something that God just put in my heart to do. It was just, that was always the goal, end state. So I did everything I could to work toward that as a young kid. I always knew that's what I wanted to do. Even in high school, going through school, studying martial arts as a kid, like, I always gravitated toward things that directly pertain to long-term becoming a police officer.
When you were a police officer for 17 years, what was that experience like for you, and what things were maybe like definitive moments in your career that make you a better instructor today than as compared to everybody else?
So going through the academy, I knew I had like these boxes I wanted to check. Like, I know I wanted to go the narcotics route. I wanted to work undercover. I wanted to work at a task force. I wanted to be on a SWAT team. I wanted to be in a city where I knew I was going to have a higher likelihood of getting into the thick of it. I looked at the 3 major cities based on my geographical location. It was like, these are the 3 major cities. This one is the highest as far as violence, right? So like one of the top 10 in the nation as far as violence per capita. I'm like, this is one of the most violent ones. I'm probably gonna have the most opportunity to do the things that I want to do there. So went there, pursued that, went through the academy, like, that was my purpose. First one in, last one to leave kind of thing. That paid off well. And I hit the ground kind of running, so to say. It wasn't a job. I saw it as a way of life. Like, I had no qualms with showing up early to work, right? Like, I was the knucklehead that would show up early to work, drive around my beat in my personal vehicle just to get kind of like a lay of the land, the tempo for the day. I'm listening to the radio before my shift. And then I was the dude that would stay after my shift in my uniform, drive around my personal vehicle, trying to see if there was somebody that I could find that I didn't get earlier on in the day, that I didn't get at the end of my shift. Can I stay a little bit after? Which is obviously, looking back on it, that's not the way we do things, but I was just super motivated. It was a way of life for me. It wasn't about a paycheck. It was about the purpose, the intrinsic worth behind it. So I pursue everything I did in my career was with that mindset. spent the first 4 years in patrol. In that time frame, I got to go to cool little assignments, the warrant task force. I got to work in the bureau for a little bit, trying to learn the investigative side of the house. Did that, and just trying to be a good street cop, like know my beat, know who the players are, get a vibe for the culture, for the place, and know exactly what I needed to do to be a good cop, and just know the beat, so to say. And I got recruited to narcotics, spent the first year in street crime. At the first 3 months doing like the hitting corners kind of thing, trying to curb activity. And it's like, man, I can do more. So I started doing UC work. No training, just kind of, I saw The Departed once. So I had this vision of what I wanted to be and how I wanted to get there, and just started doing that. Took a couple weeks off of work, came back, started doing the UC stuff, started filling that role in various capacities, did that for about a year. I had developed a reputation. I had been doing that at the municipal level, at the state level. So state task forces were now using me to do specific buys into dudes that they could not get into, targeting specifically like violent street gangs in that area. And then I got asked to do it for the feds. A couple of different federal entities asked me to do buys for them. Again, in that geographical location, I had developed the credibility to buy contraband from dudes that they were looking into at a federal level. So about a year after that, I got asked to go to a federal task force that was specifically targeting violent street gangs in our geographical area. And I got to be part of several Title III investigations, wiretaps, into those specific drug trafficking organizations that were also tied in with specific gangs, violent street gangs. I was living the dream. Did that for a stint. Got a change in administration, politics come in. They wanted to remove dudes from task forces. The task forces were heavy at that time, so they pulled dudes back. I went back to patrol, did that for like 6 months, walking a beat. So I went from buying on the street corner as a UC and setting up buys to being the walking beat police officer in plain clothes that was now arresting the same dudes on the street that I was buying from.
Oh, wow.
Definitely, it was a different take. Did that for like 6 months. It got pulled to another task force. We got pulled over to U.S. Marshal Service, Violent Fugitive Task Force, and basically, it's hard to like explain it because I feel like the civilian populace really can't grasp what we got paid to do, but we essentially got paid to do kidnappings and home invasions for bad dudes. Like this dude's a murderer, a rapist, a drug trafficker, a human trafficker. It was just, these are the most violent people in this area, and your small team of 4 to 6 dudes is specifically tasked with locate and apprehend. That's it. So again, it was just like the natural progression. It wasn't a job, it was just a way of life. Everybody in the task force at the time was switched on, committed 100% about it. Like it was not a job. There was like this camaraderie, this team aspect, we didn't need to talk to communicate. Like everybody just did their job, and we were talking without talking. Like we were communicating without any type of verbal communication necessary. It just happened all by itself kind of thing. Did that for several years, 4 years. Had a blast doing that. Intrinsic worth, tons of change, tons of bad dudes, nabbed. Lots of experience gained there. And then got asked to essentially go to the department's police academy. They're like, hey man, like we're starting the academy over with new staff. We're kind of getting rid of some of the old timers, the legacy guys that were there. And we want a team of fresh, young, experienced dudes and dudettes that just want to change the culture of the academy, of training as a whole. So we had some excellent leadership at the time. He's like, hey man, you've been on the SWAT team. You've done the NARC thing. You've done the task force thing. Like you've seen everything that we have to offer. Like we want you to go back at the academy level and essentially change it. Like start developing curriculum that you see is relevant to what's actually happening. Let's kill the disconnect between training and what they're seeing on the street. Because the academy was like, it used to be like, hey man, come in, this is how we do things. Check the box, boom, send them out. And then they get to like let's say an FTO. Now I have a new boot or an OIT, and I'm like, officer in training. It's like, okay, this is how we actually do it. It's like, why do we spend 7 months training them to have to retrain them over the course of the next year on the street? So the goal was to kind of get rid of some of those things, be more progressive as it pertains specifically to what we were seeing, current trends in domestic law enforcement. Did that. I got on the SWAT team. I got on the job in 2004, got on the SWAT team in 2008. Something I always wanted to do. Worked my way through that over the course of the 12 years that I was, over the next 12 years from 2008. 12 years later, I retired from that department, but I worked my way through the gamut of things you could do as a, domestic municipal SWAT dude, like assaulter, breacher, sniper, assistant team leader. I was the primary marksmanship and tactics instructor for the team. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff, and a lot of people, probably in reflection, just thinking about it myself, don't understand really policing and its complexities. Because policing, a lot of people think policing is reacting or encountering a suspect, and it's very defensive. It's very reactive. It's very dependent on the suspect's behavior. But you spend a lot of time in offensive law enforcement actions and kind of seeing behind the veil. And I always talk about this when I talk about law enforcement, because I've seen behind the veil that a lot of people, if they only knew what was behind the veil, what was behind the curtain, what existed in their own backyard, and then what you guys and gals in law enforcement had to do, whether it's federal, state, and local policing, have to do as a task force or a joint task force in order to curb and reduce and stop this criminal activity. The policy that's happening now that you're seeing in the country, the reason things become so systemic is because the complexities or depth of this criminal activity and this criminal organizations. Like when you don't police them on the surface, you don't do enforcing the laws or activating laws or sentencing of the laws, and there's no recourse, then all of these players all across the spectrum are destroying our country. I mean, you see the highest statistics in cities, major cities, in our history in crime. And now people are finally paying attention to maybe we should fund and not defund the police. What's your experience in looking behind the curtain? You kind of had an idea because you played cops and robbers like me when you were a kid, and you had a kind of a biased opinion of it, and then you get into it. What was that experience like for you?
It's a phenomenal question. It was shocking, right? Like I went to the academy with this presupposition that we're going to learn the best thing that you can possibly learn, like cutting edge technology, cutting edge information, like this. Policing has this, like it is literally the line that separates order from chaos if it's done properly. And I'm thinking it would only make sense that we would we would only fund this to the best that we possibly can. And it was like, whoa, you get behind the curtain, you realize that's not the case. I was the dude that went to the academy and it's like, hey, this is what we do. Roger that, this is what we do. Like, I'm gonna go home and do that for 2 hours. And I'm gonna do that for 2 more hours before I come in the next day. Which, that mentality is almost countercultural nowadays. Sad to say. That was 2004, 2008, right? Like fast forwarding through the academy, everything that we learned, like just the young dude that's inexperienced, taking everything that, the instructors are saying, the chief is saying, and, the higher up, the brass, the mayor, everyone's like, we're the best, this is the best, like we invested this. Man, getting to my first OIS, officer involved shooting, 4 years into the job, and I was like, whoa, like this is not. I had this pre-notion of what that was going to look like, and I was trained for it. I was trained by the best, and I was sadly surprised. I was surprised. I was like, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. There's a huge disconnect from what I was told it was going to be like And I realized like, okay, we are lacking in certain areas. We are lacking in training. Like we are lacking in technology. And it's not because the information's not out there. It's not just one thing. I think it's several things, but there's definitely not the intent in making law enforcement all that it needs to be and should be is not there. And you can break that down and deep dive into so many different aspects of that. But at the end of the day, or in the end, it's just not funded well. I think some of that is because of the way higher ups are made higher ups. Like when I look back retrospectively, it's like you didn't become a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain or an assistant chief or a chief or any of those things, or even like a trainer. You didn't necessarily get that position because of your ability. It wasn't necessarily because of your competency or your capabilities. It wasn't necessarily because you had earned it or had the merit, the experience. Like you and I are buddies and you trust me, so like, yeah, he's good for the job. We take a test. We all take the same test. I could be a rock star test taker and completely devoid of real world experience. And then it's solely based on that. It's solely based on, well, I need more diversity in the ranks. I need more diversity here. So we start sacrificing quality for quantity in various forms, whether it's, hey, we're not gonna get the best cars because we need more cars, or we're not gonna get the best tools because we need more tools. We won't have the best instructors just because we can't have that. And, I wanna hook up my buddy. All those politics, we see that everywhere. That transcends outside of just policing, but I think that's really the drive behind it. It's really the drive behind it, just politics getting in place. It's what's best for you and I, not necessarily what's best for the community, which is it's countercultural to team mindset. Team mindset is you and I as individuals on a team are gonna do what's best for the team, period. Even if it means that I'm gonna lose a little bit on this one. I may have to eat crow on this. This may not be the best thing for me, but it is what's best for the team. That's like real teamwork. That's a real team mindset. That doesn't necessarily happen. It's like, hey, you and me are buds, and we're gonna make sure that we do everything that we do to succeed for you and I. Forget everybody else. Like, in the end, we'll be better off.
When you retired, were you disgruntled? Were you upset, or were you just ready to move on? Was it time?
So for me, I did 17 years. I bought back sick time. So I had the ability to essentially accumulate saved or unused sick time, and that would transfer over to my pension as time served. So I knew that going into it early on. We had actually lost that contractually, union negotiations, city bargaining, all that. We got it back recently, right before I retired. So I had bought back sick time, which gave me a full 20 years as time served, 16 served, 4 years sick time thereafter. And for me, it's like I was at a point where I was at the academy for a little over 4 years. I had essentially checked every box that I wanted to at my specific municipality. I had reached the end state. I had reached the pinnacle of what I could and wanted to do. And I felt stagnant. Like the only way to grow from there forward would be to have higher ups start making legitimate changes that would be completely countercultural to what's happening in the United States at the time, right? This is just pre-COVID, at the height of the rioting and all the things that happened politically as far as the recent election and all of that. So they were promoting people devoid of experience that were making bad decisions long-term for the team, for the company, for law enforcement as a whole. They were sacrificing quality for quantity. It was just, I knew I had no ability to affect change at that point. The guys that were in charge, the good leaders that were there from the beginning that kind of put me in positions to affect change, they were gone. And I now no longer had the ability there to make any change. So pension time came up. My name popped on the lottery to retire. And it's like, hey, you can retire now, or you can stay and run the risk of not being able to retire, because it's based on a lottery essentially. So it's based on every year your seniority put you into a rank, so to say. I had literally only made it that year to retire because like 4 people backed out. So 4 people canceled out last minute. I had until I found out in October that I could retire, and I had until October 30th. I had 3 weeks to let them know yes or no. If I said no, I'd start all over again. So it just made sense financially. I had definitely sacrifice things at home. My little guy was young. My wife was super supportive. She let me obsess over the job. She took care of home so I could do that and be that thing. And it was time to start putting the family first. Right, we see how like military law enforcement, the divorce rate is through the roof. And a lot of that is because the job gets put first, the demands of the job, the collateral damage that happens just from, all the things that go on the job. So it made sense at the time. So I retired there, made the decision. And was like, hey man, like I still want to be a cop. I still want to fight crime. Like I know more now at the age that I am than I did when I was 21. I'm just as fit. Like, let's do it. So I literally retired December 31st, and I jumped into another department January 1. So
What department was that, and how long would that last?
I went to another smaller department, and I'm like, hey, this is a smaller department. Maybe I'll have the ability to make a little more change here. Like, they were way behind. Like, I mean, they were decades behind as far as tactics and techniques and SOPs, as far as like, everything. And it wasn't their fault. Just, again, small town politics. I was there from then until August. I got a job with Fieldcraft. Took my first Fieldcraft class in March. It was just, again, for me, professional development or instructor development. Every 3 months I'm taking a class. That's just for my personal growth, and it's good to be the student, always the student, so to say. The best teachers I've always found are the ones that remain students. So just professional development for me. Took that class in March, gunfighter, pistol 1, carbine 1. Had a blast. Got asked to come out 2 weeks later. Got asked to come out in AI in April. Did that. They're like, hey, do another one. Did that in May. And it was like, hey, we're gonna have you come out monthly, teach. So I did that all the way up until July. Got asked to come on to Fieldcraft full time. So I was at that department for 8 months. It was like, all right, realize that I'm not gonna affect change here. Fieldcraft, I have the ability to better prepare good Americans that want to take their preparedness to another level, be self-reliant, not outsource security and resources. And I was like, man, this fits that mission that I believe I was born for, just helping good people. So,
why do you think it's important to train civilians as a whole? I mean, I have a lot of peer and friend groups, both law enforcement and military, who are adamantly against training civilians. And whether it's liability, some of the stuff I get business-wise from different perspectives, whether it's liability or principle, whatever it may be, why do you think it's important to train civilians?
Behind every blade of grass, right? That kind of mindset. Being a cop and seeing, in a violent city, seeing like when seconds count, cops are minutes away. I feel like your ability to protect yourself is an innate God-given right. It should never be outsourced. We as a nation have kind of gone away from the staples of what our country was founded on. And that's one of those principal God-given rights, your ability to defend yourself and your family. Like, we are only stronger as a country, right? Like, the strength of the United States is that it was once a United States. Like, it was once states united. And like, as we start to fracture and get away from those things, as we get away from that, we become weak as a nation, as a culture, as an entity. And our ability to defend ourselves first and foremost is everything. I can't think back on all the ugly things that you see as a cop, right? Like, if that individual, if that mother, that father, that brother, that sister, that neighbor, that stranger was better prepared, they were on scene first. Like, in your own critical incident, you are your own first responder. That should never be outsourced. There's a certain power that comes with being self-reliant when it comes to those things. It is intrinsically deep meaning, like the depth of what that is worth, it can almost be incomprehensible. It's difficult to articulate if people don't understand how important it is to be able to be better prepared. And that's like, hey man, look at anywhere on the world stage where something bad has happened at a national level. Look at Ukraine, for instance. That's the most recent thing that kind of pops up. It's like, now you're going to try to teach people how to start being prepared. Now you're going to start teaching people how to use a firearm or conduct basic safety maneuvers, defensive maneuvers, like way behind the curve. Action always beats reaction, especially inside the reactionary gap. It's like, why would we not do those things? Let's take it outside the scope or context of violence, right? Like if it's not even violence, let's talk about, disasters, natural disasters. Look at Katrina. Like, look at how bad Katrina was. If every single person was of a preparedness mindset, it doesn't mean you have to be, the prepper. There's degrees and layers to that. It obviously has a negative connotation for a reason. But if you think about it, if all those people were smarter, if they had a better degree of competence, a better degree of capability in relation to dealing with something along those lines, whether it's medical, food storage, just self-reliance in those regards, having their vehicle set up appropriately, all those things, the networking, the communication, all of that would have made that a better scenario. It would not have been as bad. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes we're dealt a turd sandwich, so to say. It's either way, toast or crackers is going to take like a turd sandwich, but we can help mitigate some of the loss.
You have a lot of experience, and I think about how you distill that experience for the end user. And what are some core competencies or some training methodology or even philosophy that you use as a mantra in how you communicate? Like, what's it for? Like, why? Why are you teaching for Fieldcraft? Like, what's your purpose in it all? And what is your objective? Like, what do you want out of this experience?
Performance parallels preparation. And that translates to everything. Our performance is always paralleled by our preparation prior to. That preparation can be adequate or it can be inadequate. You think, and that translates to whether you're being a husband, a father, a farmer, a shooter, a law enforcement dude. It doesn't matter to what end, what career, what capacity you apply that to. Performance is always paralleled by preparation. And that's kind of like one of the mantras that I push in class. So when we realize that, we have to ask, like, what is going to allow for proper performance? And I talk about the 3 C's of performance in every class. It's really more of a mindset thing. And those 3 C's are simply competency, first and foremost. Like, so competency is huge. Capacity is huge. Capability, right? Those 3 C's, right? Capability, capacity, and competence work together synergistically. And if you remove one of those from the equation, your performance drops, right? Like by a third, if you will. So the first and foremost is like, number 1, capacity. And I mean mental and physical. Like mental capacity, do you have the mental capacity? Like a lot of the classes that I teach pertain to violence, fear, human aggression, like the combatives, the self-defense portion of the company. And a lot of that is because of my experience. You could be the most capable dude in the world with all the hardware, software, but if you don't have the mental capacity to be able to employ righteous violence, right? Violence done correctly, legally, ethically, morally. If you can't do that, it means nothing. You could be the most, like you could be a monster physically. Like you could be the CrossFit champion of the world for all time. But if you run from the fight, it means nothing. If you're not willing to engage, it means nothing. And there's difference. Like I've seen, for me at least, everyone fights back at some point. There's always a breaking point where like almost everyone fights back. It's too late by then. So I've found that there's definitely a different mental capacity for those that have the ability, the mental capacity to embrace the right decision violently, preemptively. So I can clearly, reasonably articulate the necessity for this motion, like this course of action, and I can do it before. Like I can do it before. I'm not waiting till I get punched in the face. I'm not waiting for the dude to kick down my door. I'm not waiting for the gunshot to ring out. I have the ability, the mental capacity to be able to say, I can do this now, prior to. The other aspect is obviously physical, like physical capacity. If I am switched on, I have the mental capacity, but the hardest thing I do all day is put a fork in my mouth, and my heart rate never gets above 80 beats per minute. Like, what's going to happen when that bad scenario happens and my body fails me? It's just not there. I haven't invested. I'm going to withdraw from this bank and I haven't put anything in a savings account. There's nothing there because I don't take my physical capacity serious. So there, you can obviously deep dive into that, but capacity, I think, is first and foremost. That's the foundation on which the house is built. The next thing is obviously competency, right? And competency in relation to whatever it is you're doing. When we have a higher layer level of competency, it's like software, right? Like all the hardware in the world without the software means nothing. Like the rally car racing thing. You give that to a 14-year-old kid who knows nothing about driving. It could be the most tuned supercar in the world, means nothing. He's just a liability. It's a false sense of security. So that competency is everything. Always upgrade software over hardware. With the right degree of software, with the right degree of competency, you understand things at a principle level. And this allows me to adapt, to modify specific circumstances or specific things to make it fit the overall outcome, right? Like from just breaching. If you look at the principles of breaching, like the goal is to defeat this thing and get inside here, so to say. If I look at breaching from a principle approach, I can modify the tools to get that. If I say, all right, I'm either going to pick, push, pull, spread, shoot, cut, burn, right? Those 7 principles. Well, now I can find tools that allow me to accomplish those specific principles. And we can change it based on contextual parameters of where we are, what we're doing. Just an analogy. Competency is everything. So that's, again, one aspect of it. The next thing is always capacity. And in capacity, what I mean by capacity is what do we have for hardware? Capability. We have capacity, we have competence, and now we have capability. Capabilities meaning, what do you have hardware-wise, right? Like we take, let's say from my background, domestic law enforcement, like the cop can only do so much if he's on a walking beat, and his radio only works half the time. Like he could be the best cop in the world, but if he doesn't know what's happening because he can't hear the radio and he can't get to the location in time, he's behind the curve. Now, if I take that same cop, but I give him a car that can get him where he needs to go, a radio that works all the time, clearly, effectively, all right, tools that are at the top of the game, allows him to win, scenarios at a lower degree of violence, that's huge. So it's like that trifecta, that synergistic relationship between capacity, competence, and capability that really translates to your overall ability to perform. And our preparation has to be in all 3 of those areas. That model fits, like that's the thing that I've learned over the course of my life. I think it directly applies to what I do, my role here in the company, which is why I believe in it so much. It's why I believe in the company. It's why I'm here.
That seems like the principle or the structure that you do everything, even your own personal life. And I see a lot of guys in the industry, not our guys, because instructors for Fieldcraft are living this. This is why we recruit this way, because it's men and women who were, prior to becoming instructors, the guy or the gal going above and beyond because they cared about the job. It brought them profound purpose, and they weren't just thinking of it as a way to make a living. It was their living. It's what they did. When you look at all of the things that you've done for Fieldcraft and teaching and the feedback that you get, what's the most profound element of the experience that brings you purpose? Because a lot of people, you're not doing this for the money. there's not a lot of money to be made in tactical training, period, even on the company side. It's part of a very diverse business plan, but outside of business, outside of monetization, there's profound purpose. What is it that motivates you and drives you from a feedback perspective that you've gotten from people that you've trained?
So I am the product of my exposure, right? Like my exposure being a combination of experience, directly, indirectly, like inferred experience, as well as training. And that's like kind of the sum of who we are. Everything I do is obviously first and foremost, I'm a representation of obviously myself first and foremost as a God-fearing, family-loving American, as a teammate. So the feedback that I generally see in classes, whether it's, I give all my students my phone number after every class. Like after class, like, hey, let's go grab chow. Let's go hang out. Let's build this bond. Let's build the tribe. Let's build what this is. Like, I'm not above you, I'm beside you, right? Like I'm passing on to you what's been passed on to me. I've had a lot of good mentors that took the time to take out from their own time the ability to take, have a meal with me, have a conversation with me, send me a direct message. I mean, I got guys where literally I was at work on a rooftop, glassing a dude at a violent protest where I'm like, hey, I may have to, send a solution for this problem. Like, I have a question. I'm like, all right, cool. This is what we got to think about. Boom, 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 boom. It's like, all right, cool. Like, taking time from your family to answer that now, like, that's just, how do I not pay that forward? How do I not give? I think, just my moral compass is driven by how I was raised and what I believe, and just me being a Christian. So it's like, for me, I always want to pay it forward. I represent my God. I represent my family. I represent myself. I represent us as a nation. I represent the company. I represent all those who have invested in me. Everyone that's invested in me, be it family, friends, business relationships, mentors, etc. I represent all those people. And I always want to represent them well. And the feedback that I love getting back in class is just like, hey, like, thank you for just being real. Thank you for taking your time to answer a question. Thank you for, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for not holding back. Thank you for giving us your all. It's not a 9 to 5. I've never had that mentality. It's not like, this is a paycheck. It's not for that. Like, those are just, those are the side effects. The root purpose is to pay it forward. And that's the example that's set for my wife, the example that's set for my son. Like, I want him to know, because at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. Like, I got lost in my persona as a crime fighter. And that was like my identity. And now it's like, nope, that's not my identity. Like, you realize, no, that's another role. My identity is the Christian husband, father, the American, right? And then all these other things are roles that help me push those things. So
it's a lot of insight into the mind of David Acosta. There's so much more content and things that we need to get out there and focus on, especially in learning from guys and gals with profound experience like Dave. I'm intrigued because I want to learn as well. Like Dave said, you got to have that always be a student mentality. We've got a lot of content rolling out on Fieldcraft Survival's channel. This is a little bonus segment. I want to get my instructors and the guys who are paying it forward and working their asses off to provide you education. I want to get their stories out there because I want you to understand who you potentially would be training with and the caliber of instructors and people that we have at Fieldcraft Survival. Follow Fieldcraft Survival's YouTube channel, subscribe, and get ready to learn. I'm excited about this season. Because we got guys like Dave, Matt's, Casey's, the Kirstens, Kevin Owens back in the game, and educating you guys. Look, this is a community experience. The more, the merrier. So, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
We'll have all Dave's contact information and all the links below in the notes. And make sure that you take the opportunity with good weather, with everything happening in the world, to get out there and listen to all of our free stuff, get educated, and then grab your sack and come out and train with us at Fieldcraft Survival. Until next time, later, guys.